So guys, I want to talk about a wee bit and try and make this as simple as possible, how you mobilise fat for fuel, how you reuse fat for fuel through exercise. Now remember, I said in the video earlier that there's two types of exercises, aerobic and anaerobic. Anaerobic is working the muscle, the stored muscle energy, which is glycogen, which comes from carbohydrates. So we eat carbohydrates, we break it down into glucose. Glucose then stores in the muscle as glycogen. That's the storage. It's glycogen is converted into glucose is converted into glycogen stored within the muscle. So whenever we activate the muscle under high demand or high tension or high exertion, the energy is there ready to go. All right, bang, 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 bang. I only have to use that. Now, that's because we're asking for a quick energy release that's already there in the system ready to go. So if we use aerobic means with air. So anaerobic means using the fuel without air. So the muscle's there, the fuel's there, it's ready to go. But for fat to be burnt, we need oxygen. That's why it's aerobic activity. So it's got to be oxidized, all right? So it would be the oxidation. So what happens, let's say you think about your body fat. Take your belly fat for example, but you're talking about fat all over. What you have to remember is we can't spot reduced fat. We can't say I only want to burn fat here. So for example, I'm going to do 100 sit-ups just to reduce my belly fat. It doesn't work that way because it's stored energy. It's like having a petrol tank and saying I only want to burn petrol from this side of the tank and not this side of the tank. It just doesn't work that way. So we burn it all over. So let's just think about the glycogen first, the anaerobic. So we do weightlifting, we do something explosive, some high tension, high demand. We use stored muscle glycogen. It's there, it's ready to go. Now we can use that for maybe about 20 to 30 minutes before we run out of glycogen. When we run out of glycogen, the body will then look for an alternative fuel source, which is fat. Now fat is stored in what's called adipose tissue. And now you see your fat cells, your belly has your fat. That fat's made up of cells, like wee bags, think of wee bags. Now, an interesting fact is, you know, we get some people who say, I have a fast metabolism, I don't store fat, or I have a slow metabolism, I do store fat. That's not necessarily true. You're genetically built or genetically born with a certain amount of adipose tissue, or adipocytes, right? So it's cells, wee bags that can hold fat. So someone like me, I put on weight very, very easy, and I can put on quite a lot of it. Especially around the belly. That means around my midsection there's lots of wee bags, think of them as wee water balloons, right? They can fill up a big size and just sit there, and there's lots of them. So I've got lots of adipocytes with a big capacity. Someone who's born with very little amount of these wee water balloons, and sometimes even the ones they have will only go to a certain size. They've only got so much storage area, and that's all they'll hold. Now the problem here is those kind of people who don't have very much adipocytes or fat storage areas, if they overconsume calories, it's still the same overconsumption of calories. So for example, if I overconsume calories, my energy will store here in these adipose tissues, adipocytes, because there's lots of them. They've got a high volume. I've got lots of wee water balloons that have a high capacity. So if I eat too much energy, the energy can go into those wee water bags and I can store them here. Does that make sense? So under the skin, you've all these wee water balloons that store energy and they can go to a big size. Right. Let's say then the other example of someone who doesn't have very many of them, and even the ones that they have only have a very small capacity. What happens when they're full because they've overconsumed calories? Well, what happens then, the body will still store fat, but instead of saving it in the wee water bags, which is called subcutaneous, it stores it as visceral fat, which is inside. Visceral just means inside the organs, so around the liver, around the heart, around the lungs, you store fat. If you ever see somebody who's relatively lean, but they've got a hard, round belly, that's visceral fat. That means that the overconsumption of calories is now stored inside. Now, someone like me, I have a lot of adipocytes and they're a large capacity. I can still start to, if they're full, the excess will still spill over to visceral fat. Now, women in the menopause, because you've elevated cortisol and you've elevated insulin, this causes a hormone called LPL, lipoprotein lipase, that tells the body to put it on the visceral fat. And not even in the wee bags. Even if there's room in the wee bags, it would even put it on it and put it straight on, because that's what that hormone does. So anyway, so we have two types of fat: subcutaneous, which is the spongy stuff on the outside, and visceral, which is accumulation around the heart. Now, visceral fat and subcutaneous fat can both be burnt off the same way. There's no difference in that, but it's where they're stored that's going to do the damage. One is definitely very dangerous: heart, blood pressure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, all that kind of nasty stuff. No, but we can still burn it the same way because it's still stored pretty much the same. So inside those adipocytes, those wee bags, We store fat then and fatty acids with a glycerol cell. It's called a triglyceride. So with a glycerol molecule with 3 fats attached to it, 3 glycerols, right? 3 fatty molecules and 3 fatty acids attached on the glycerol. It's called a triglyceride. So it's stored as a triglyceride. And whenever we want to use that fat for fuel, let's say, right, I'm going to do some exercise. I'm not going to do high demand stuff. I'm going to do aerobic work, which means the intensity is slightly lower, so the energy demand is not that rapid. So that means I don't have to get energy instantly. I can look for it from the fat sources. Now, you have to build up the enzymes to be able to actually tap on it. So for the first 10-15 minutes of your aerobic activity, nothing's really happening. What you're using is using blood sugars and maybe a bit of glycogen to get everything turning, to get all that hormone, that lipase kicked up, to actually break down the fat. Because what we have to do, the body's got to go on, it's got to release a hormone that tells the adipose tissue to release the triglyceride. The triglyceride then has to be cut for the fatty molecules to be separated, and those fatty molecules then have to transport through the body. Now, fat and water don't mix. Your blood is pretty much water. So the protein, the fat cell, right, the fat cell has to be wrapped up in a protein called albumin. It's wrapped in albumin and it's transported down to the muscles that we want to use. Now that's a very long, laborious process just to get that. That's how we mobilize the fat cells. We start moving, we increase energy demand, we increase oxygen, because we need aerobic is with oxygen, because we've got to be to oxidize the fat cell. So we start breathing, the body thinks, okay, I need some energy here. I'm not in high demand, I don't want to use the muscle glycogen. I'm going to produce a hormone. I'm going to start getting into those adipose tissues. I'm going to release the triglyceride. I'm going to break the triglyceride into 3 fatty molecules. I'm going to put those fatty molecules, I'm going to wrap them with albumin, which is a protein, and I'm going to transport that to the muscle. So you can see how much time that takes to actually mobilize the fat cells and then oxidize it. It then goes into the mitochondria in the cell, and in the mitochondria then it's then oxidized into ATP, which is the energy that we use. I know I tried to say I'll keep it simple, but it's not that simple. So what I'm trying to say is, just because you're going to caloric deficit, right, doesn't mean you're really mobilizing and burning much body fat. We're not storing much body fat, but the amount of energy that your metabolic rate uses isn't that great. It's not that big. Do you know what I mean? We're creating maybe a 500 caloric deficit a day to hopefully burn into your fat cells to use as that deficit. But if you really want to burn the fat, you have to exercise. All right, so think about doing aerobic work or anaerobic work, sorry, to build the muscle tissue, because if there's more muscle, there's more cells that will require the fat whenever they start to use them. Does that make sense? So somebody with a wee skinny leg and somebody with a big leg, the big leg just moving is going to demand more energy than the wee skinny leg. That's a faster metabolism. So that person with a wee skinny leg walking, and this person with a big leg walking, the big leg's going to use more fat because there's more cells actually asking for energy. The energy demand increases. Does that make sense? So we've got to start exercising, guys. You're not going to just diet yourself lean. It's not going to happen. Your metabolism will shut down. You'll burn muscle tissue. So we need 2 to 3 resistance sessions a week to build that muscle tissue, the metabolism, and then we need anaerobic work at least 30 minutes, because it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes to produce the enzymes to actually start mobilizing the fat. And this is where we take the things like the green tea and the CLA to help, and caffeine help to mobilize it. Because what happens is the body starts to produce cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, and those are the things that are actually going to start to break down those fatty molecules from the glyceride. All right, I know it's very complicated, but if you're going to take anything from this, we need to move to burn fat. Your aerobic work and your resistance training combined is the key here. Now, I wouldn't say that there's one exercise type better than the other. I wouldn't say just do weights or just walking. It's a combination of both, guys. You need this if you want to burn the fat. It's a very laborious, complicated process, and even then, whenever those fatty molecules go into the mitochondria, you've got the whole Krebs cycle starting to produce ATP, right? ATP is the energy source that everything uses ATP. So let's get that on and let's get moving.